Alrighty. So, if you haven't seen already, Jonathan Major's sentencing has been postponed. They're going to be back for another hearing that's set to take place virtually now at around 2:15 p.m. Eastern today. So, maybe we'll get an update on what happens with those motions, but I'm not sure with the way, if it's Judge Gaffey still, the way Judge Gaffey runs his court. They're not going to start something till about 2:15, and he likes to get up out of there by 4:30. I'm not sure we'll hear any type of sentencing today. Maybe we will. If something comes in, I'll do a video on it. But we get the first reporting from James Ford here. He's a reporter with Pix 11 out of New York. He went down to the courtroom today.
911 came true.
And he's saying a lot of changes in the Jonathan Majors sentencing originally scheduled for this morning. He'll be appearing virtually for a hearing on the motion that his attorneys have filed, and he says a motion. But we're going to see other articles say motions. But he was in the court, so we'll see. So his attorneys have filed instead of sentencing. It will be at 2:15 p.m. Pix 11 News is here, and we'll keep you posted. So they're going to be in the courtroom all day. And then Johnny Brown, hey, how are you? And then you said mornings like what? Thank you so much for the update. Yep, so it just seems like they got in this morning. Priya Chaudhry filed at least one motion. We knew from, and we can pull this up really quick. Was it, Jonathan Majors last week, the defense team filed a motion to make sure that the stuff filed under seal, the Molyneux evidence packet, they made a motion to request that that stuff remains under seal after sentencing, just so it doesn't end up becoming public record. Motions, okay, that makes so much more sense. And then, so we have that from James Ford here. Again, he's saying a motion. But, maybe he's typing quickly from the court. Humans are humans and we make typos sometimes. If we hop over to Deadline with Sean Piccoli and Dominic Patton, we have, a bunch of backstory on the case, but they tell us about this conviction. Plans shifted first thing Tuesday as lead defense lawyer Priya Chaudhry opted to file various motions. So we're getting a plural here from Deadline. And then set to address those motions. Again, the hearing's now going to begin around 2:15 Eastern. And then nothing really that interesting there. But Dominic Patton did make a tweet here, and I noticed one of you, who is this? We have JM here with the Jonathan Majors picture. It's all up fighting the war in response to Dominic Patton and their article right here on X. Correcting the article saying, wouldn't say the jurors fully sided with the prosecutor's story, as they didn't believe he was an abuser, because he was acquitted on those intent to cause injury, assault charges, and the one harassment charge. That was their case. Everything with intent was dropped, and there was no proof he caused the injuries. She admitted to violence. So shout out to JM37837664 out here fighting the turf wars over on X to get the record straight. And then, if you guys heard me mention... Oh, and I just realized I didn't switch the tab. I'm a struggle streamer, you guys. Let me share that tab so you can see it. So this was JM37 going after Dominic Patton's article here to make sure that the media isn't out here framing this conviction as a win across the board for the prosecution or any type of verdict that means the jury believed Jonathan Majors was abusive, because that's not what the charges that stuck actually suggest. And then for posterity, since I was a bad streamer and didn't share my tabs, this was the Deadline article here that basically repeats the same information we got from Pix 11. If you see my thumbnail, I have a gripe that I want to pick. That is going to be with this Los Angeles Times article, which seems fine on its surface. It was published just today. Hollywood insiders on Jonathan Majors' future, public missteps made a bad decision worse. Now, we know that things kind of toppled on this case for various reasons, but while we go through this, I want you to pay attention to missteps and what they're actually describing as missteps throughout this little article. They posted this at 3 a.m. this morning, probably trying to get some traction off the interest in the sentencing today. So they got this out here. Maybe it's clickbait, search bait fodder, who knows. But they say Mark Anthony Neal knew Jonathan Majors was in deep trouble. the chair of the African and African American Studies program at Duke University, was stunned last March when he heard that Majors had been charged with assaulting and harassing his former girlfriend, actor Grace Jabari. Like legions of fans and critics impressed by Majors' muscular performances in The Last Black Man in San Francisco, Grade 3, Lovecraft Country, and other projects, Neil feared it was a stunning setback for a talented black actor who seemed to be on the brink of a breakthrough stardom. And, given the long history of racist tropes about black male sexuality in America, he knew the case would be inflected by the fact that Jabari is white. This is all fair enough, right? Up to here. My immediate response was, he's done. And that's a valid feeling, whether you believe anything underlying is true or not. The social opinion was rampant. You know how it goes. Neil said in a phone interview last month. So they're writing this article today, making Neil kind of the centerpiece of it, right? He's the only person we're going to hear from specifically. But they had this interview last month and they waited to post it until 3 a.m. today. It was a bad look, considering not only the culture at large, but also thinking about how Black Americans would respond. I felt it would be difficult for him to navigate the situation. Fair enough, on his part. But I do want to point out, why are we going to someone who's a department at Duke University? He's the chair of the department of the African and African American Studies Department at Duke University. And he's allowed to say that what Jonathan Majors does impacts the culture at large. But when Jonathan makes a recording, or he's recorded without his knowledge, and says, I'm a great man and I'm doing things for my culture, that's highly criticized. But yet we have a whole interview centering around this one single quote from a month ago, published the morning of his sentencing. And that's no criticism of Neil, it's criticism of when it's okay for one person to say something and not somebody else. They go through the aftermath of the arrest. Majors already suffered serious career damage, losing his management and public relations firm, as well as ad campaigns with the U.S. Army and the Texas Rangers baseball team. But the fallout after a New York jury in December found him guilty on 2 of 4 counts was particularly swift and brutal. Well, it took 3 days of deliberations. Disney fired Majors from his role as supervillain Kang the Conqueror in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He was cut from a film about basketball star Dennis Rodman, there was already shifts going on before the verdict, and Magazine Dreams, which had sparked early Oscar buzz for Majors after it premiered at the 2023 Sundance Film Festival, is in limbo after being dropped by distributor Searchlight Pictures. Still, as Majors faces sentencing in the case Tuesday, this is where it gets interesting. Neil and others say it's the actor's post-conviction behavior that has hurt him most. We don't have a quote from Neil saying this. He was interviewed a month ago. He could have been interviewed before that interview, the GMA interview even took place. So this is so vague. Neil, where did he say this? You quote him here, talking about his reaction. Literally he says, my immediate response. We get a quote about his immediate response. But then this article frames this new perception. Neil and others say it's the actor's post-conviction behavior that hurt him the most. But it seems like he could have been interviewed before this one public interview that was framed as he's speaking for the first time. So what post-conviction behavior? And who are these others that are also substantiating this expert opinion? So I was reading this. Everything was like fine and well, cool. Someone speaking on what happens when a black man is accused of something, right? All fair game, valid. But then we get to this framing here. The whole point of this article is to say Jonathan Majors is hurting himself by his own behavior post-conviction. What behavior? And who are these others? Because Neil's not saying it. And they're saying that because of that, that's why there's doubts on his ability to repair his reputation once his legal troubles are behind him. I have a huge problem with this. I know it seems like a stupid small paragraph. But just think about what that means. Like, there's nothing here with any expert saying it's his post-conviction behavior. There's no specifics about his post-conviction behavior. And then the one example they're going to give, those missteps. So I'm thinking, cool, we're finally going to get some detail. We're going to get rid of the vagueness. We're going to back up this random argument that it's his own behavior post-conviction damaging him. We're going to get some detail, right? Those missteps. along with his decision to stay in what he has described as an unhealthy relationship while his career was on the upswing, have clouded optimism among his admirers that Major... Are you guys unoptimistic? Might regain at least some of his former traction in Hollywood. What missteps? Where in this article do we have any description of what post-conviction things that Majors has done that are missteps? They're expecting us to take this for granted and just be like, oh yeah, it's the way they want us to go out in Pam's words, talk to that heifer we know, talk to everyone we know, and say, yeah, it's all the things he's doing post-conviction. He's burying himself with that. They think we're going to read stuff like this and go out and just absorb it and repeat it. But there's no examples of missteps here. The only thing they detail is his decision to stay with Grace Jabari before March 25th. So how is that his behavior after conviction? So, I read this article, and it's stupid. But I got mad because it's just this short little garbage. Let me see what you guys are saying over in the chat. You guys are live and ready today. And then, hey, Jameer, by the way, I said hey to you in the chat, but hey now that I'm live. And then, hey, Life Miller, thank you. I'm losing my voice, so hopefully I look all right. And 2:15, hopefully this time flies. You know, depends on the judge's mood today, I guess, or how fast these motions have to be gone through. Now, Danny Does Law made a good point that Judge Gaffey seems to kind of just, oh, you filed a motion? Cool, I'm going to deny it. So maybe it will go pretty quickly. But if it's actually looked at, if arguments are allowed to be made, and Judge Gaffey typically likes to get out of there by 4:30, 2:15 to 4:30, especially with everyone getting set up, it's going to be virtual. So you've got to deal with those, like, Zoom struggles, right? Everyone trying to sign in, make sure the internet and mics work. If they don't start until, like, 2:30, that's 2 hours to hear multiple motions. So, I don't know what we'll get out of today. We might get some news reporting from Pix 11 on the content of whatever motions get to be argued. And then Earl, hey Earl. So this was just a waste of time. Yeah. This man is innocent and those false allegations need to stay sealed. I agree because you know what? This is something, from my understanding, the stuff that's in that Molyneux packet is relating to stuff that was reported by Variety and Rolling Stone, you know, Tatiana Siegel, Cheyenne Roundtree. Maybe there's a bit more substantiation, little details that we weren't able to see that they didn't go and update or do new articles on. But from those 40 people, not one of them has come forward and said anything else. In fact, the one person that was on Twitter saying something was kind of just leaving it as a vague accusation that he was terrible to work with on set. And there's been nothing said further. Like, even the people that were going and speaking on Twitter didn't have much to come out and say. So, I'm not trying to goad or poke at the hornet's nest, but where are these people? Like, are you scared all of a sudden to come out and say what you were willing to say to a news reporter? Because a lot of this stuff was reported to the Rolling Stone, to Cheyenne Roundtree. These weren't things that were put into, you know, a statement to the prosecution that the media then got their hands on. These were things that these people were willing to speak to a reporter about, but then they weren't willing to speak about it any further. I doubt that maybe there's one or two, maybe, but I think if they had multiple sworn statements and someone was willing to testify, we would have heard some buzz about that. About, you know, some victim wanting to testify, wanting to be on the witness list, whatever. We've got nothing like that with any of these things that were said to Rolling Stone, Tatiana Siegel with Variety, actually moving any further than what we've seen already reported. So where is it? And I agree. There's no point in unsealing them because everything is already in these articles. And then, hey, Spoiler Kings, what's up? Good to see you. And then Caesar says, is there any way they just clear him completely today, or is that out the window? I mean, the judge could come along. I doubt the judge would do this. I doubt the prosecution. You know, if the judge does something that the prosecution doesn't find agreeable with sentencing, remember, the state can also make appeals too. So if the judge were just to walk up out there and be like, oh, I know you got convicted, but I'm just going to, you know, vacate the judgment. Like, the prosecution's going to appeal the judge's discretion there. So I doubt that this judge especially will come out the gate and make that decision. Even if the judge kind of feels like that might be what should happen, they'll probably, any reasonable judge would leave it to the defense team to appeal that decision and take it to the appeals courts. And then, hey, good to see you. You guys are here bright and early today. At this point, anything postponed or delayed screams foul play and sabotage. So at this point, it's not exactly delayed just for the sake of being delayed. It is delayed because there are motions and arguments that need to be heard. So that's not atypical. It might be atypical for a case of, misdemeanors. Usually people plea out. Even Kevin Porter Jr., who had the money and the tenacity, it seemed like, to fight the case, and evidence kind of on his side, considering his supposed victim was like, this never happened to me, and I have recorded evidence of the prosecution playing games. He still chose to take a plea deal, which I suspect is due to he wants to get back into the NBA and keep his career moving rather than drag this out for a 9-month trial, just for 2 charges that he saw Jonathan Majors get convicted on, even though the evidence seems to be in Jonathan Majors' favor. So I don't think the delay necessarily screams foul play. I think we just typically don't see a small misdemeanor case like this making it to trial and then having a defendant who has the resources and the drive to continue on with filing appeals and motions. They usually just accept their fate, even if they think they're innocent, because it's stressful. It costs time and money to keep fighting the fight. And then, yeah, Artemis, I don't know, the one I still have on my screen here, this was, right? It was Los Angeles Times. It's covering, it's up here. Yeah. So Los Angeles Times, sometimes their reporting is really good and detailed, to be honest, but this was really short article with one quote from an interview from over a month ago. And I just thought it was weird. They wrote this whole thing up to publish it at 3 a.m. this morning on the day of sentencing to frame this little point. This is the takeaway point, that it's his own actions post-conviction that are burying his hole deeper. It doesn't make sense. So yeah, I think you guys are all going with the same line of thinking on this Los Angeles Times article. And yeah, what is post-conviction behavior? I need receipts, because they publicized an ABC. Is this the ABC article here? Let me find it. Yeah, so I have it syndicated here through MSN, but it's really published by ABC. And they're talking about the sentencing coming up today or whatever, but most of it is just background context, and they keep bringing up, well, Jabari said this during testimony, but in our own interview with him, he told us, I was confused when the verdict came down, and that never happened with the phone, blah, 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 blah. So we've got this interview that ABC hyped up as being the first time he's speaking publicly since the verdict came down. So if not the GMA interview, what post-conviction behavior are we talking about? Are we talking about the puppies? The new puppy? Are we talking about him being at the dog trainers with Megan Good? Are we talking about him getting a parking ticket? What is this post-conviction behavior? And what does it mean if I get a puppy or if I get a parking ticket? What is that supposed to say about me? So, yeah. And again, for context, especially, there's 72 of you in here now. I think it was 40 earlier when I first pulled up this Los Angeles Times article that's talking about it's his own post-conviction behavior that's hurting him. They've got this whole idea, we're going to interview this one person for this interview. We interviewed him for this a month ago. The Good Morning America interview was beginning of January, right? January 8th or so, parts of it started to air. It's possible that when they interviewed this man, that interview wasn't even out yet, let alone the full and complete version of it. So the only thing we know as his post-conviction behavior is puppies, a parking ticket, and this GMA interview. So which one is it? Which one is it? And Jameer, it doesn't seem that Neil knows Jonathan personally. It seems like they reached out to him because of his, he's the chair of the African and African American Studies program at Duke University. So he's supposed to be the expert insight into, they're asking him questions about how the public's going to react when they hear this news of someone rising to stardom who happens to be a black actor being accused of assaulting their white girlfriend, which I think is fair enough for them to want to get that kind of discourse and analytical insight. But it really has nothing to do with post-conviction behavior. But exactly, this is how a false narrative can destroy a person. And then, hey, Juanita. I know I'm on really early. And hey, Ada. And then, yeah, it should still be with Judge Gaffey because this is still sentencing. So appeals could be, we don't know who that will be, but this should still be Judge Gaffey, which is why I keep joking that if we're getting there at 2:15 to reconvene on a virtual hearing about these, at least one motion that Priya Chaudhry filed this morning, I don't think we'll hear anything about sentencing today. So, but we may get updates on what the motions are about. Again, we do know the one motion is to keep that Molyneux evidence under seal and, not let that become press records. But it seems there's another motion, at least one filed. And it seems like someone is trying to ruin him for some reason. They're dragging this out to cause maximum damage. I agree. The allegations, and then Unapologetic says the allegations should stay sealed. His life has been ruined enough over allegations. And that's what I mean. If they're going to become unsealed, they've got to be addressed. But the problem is, if they become unsealed, we're just going to have this rehash of what happened in, was it June? May, June? When we had all this buzz about there's multiple other accusers. They're just going to come out and repeat those stories because that's what this packet refers to. They're not going to come out and say hey, we've already looked at this stuff and we're going to write another article on it and we're going to preface it by saying, hey, we've already looked at this stuff months ago and we've got nothing new to add to it except that it's technically into the public record now. They're not going to contextualize their rewriting of it. They're just going to rewrite it as if it's a new story with new accusers. Let's hope the judge has a good lunch, leaving him in a good mood and not too sleepy to read motions like a reasonable human being. You never know. Yeah, doing things right after lunchtime is not always the smartest decision. And then, so Arbiko, you say Twitter can be a cesspool of false identities. Yep, we saw that with the Adam Foss case. For what it's worth, that prosecution wanted to bring in a bunch of tweets that people submitted anonymously. And they were all like, girl, I had the same experience, except we never had sex. But then they framed it as 12 people coming forward and claiming they were also victims of sexual assault by Adam Foss. And most of the texts were most of the screenshots were oh, he DM'd me and I got weird vibes. Or we were DMing on Instagram and I felt uneasy because he was hitting on me, but I kept going with it because, I thought there could be job opportunities. And I'm not kidding you. I'm not just creative licensing that. One of them was he was messaging me on Instagram and I thought I could meet and network through him. So I kept messaging him. And she took her story, her experience, and said it was another experience of Reagan Seeley, who had accused Adam Foss of rape in a Medium blog post some couple years before the DA decided to press charges and arrest Adam Foss. There's 10 to 12 people that came forward saying they had the same experiences, but their experiences were, one was consensual sex, and even said, if I didn't want to have sex with him, we didn't. He would drink and I would go to sleep. And then the others didn't ever have physical sex with him. But this all came from crowdsourcing of social media posts. And this man had to go and sit at a 2-week trial for it. Just a waste of resources. And that's the case, by the way, where one of the jurors was, from the reporting that I saw, the state wanted to strike one of the jurors. He was a black graduate of NYU. He has an MBA. And they wanted to strike him because they didn't think he would be able to understand jury instructions. Which is so much funnier now, knowing that in the Jonathan Majors case, the jury couldn't comprehend how that fourth harassment charge worked. Because they kept asking questions can you explain it again? Can you explain the charges? Can you explain that harassment charge again? So we have one case where someone with an MBA, the same district attorney, prosecutors want to, during voir dire, strike this juror because he won't be able to understand jury instructions. But then we had a whole jury instruction issue with the Jonathan Majors case not too long after. Just wild. And then, yet, Juanita, this is so true. So Juanita says every time they delay, they get another round of damaging media coverage. And that's absolutely true. And it's kind of annoying, right? Like, oh, we're going to get some article that's, oh, it's delayed. But then when you open it, it just rehashes everything that Jabari said and the prosecution said. Nothing new to us, right? You see me skim through some of the articles. But to someone else, it's just repetition, right? They're going to keep seeing it's delayed. Oh, Grace Jabari said he assaulted her, and the prosecution alleged a pattern of abuse. And that's they put this in each little article that they put out there. So, and then Arbiko says, and Rolling Stone has a history of playing loose with certain stories or perspectives. And that's why I'm interested to see in what's going on with Dustin Pusch. I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but that's the defamation attorney that Jonathan Majors has retained. He was sitting in court a couple different days. He's already won a case against the Rolling Stone. So let's go for round 2, buddy. We've got a Super Bowl 58 matchup with the Chiefs versus 49ers. They were faced off in Super Bowl 54. Let's do another round off of Dustin Pusch versus Rolling Stone, because I'm here for it. And Erica Dixon, I think that's true. They wouldn't even give their name. And that's kind of, on one hand, it's everyone can understand the idea that someone, a real witness, could be afraid of repercussions by going public, right? They could be feared because of the backlash from others. They could fear retribution from the person they're giving testimony about. Everybody, common sense, we know that that could be a real thing. But when you come with 40 people, and there's no evidence to substantiate that Jonathan Majors is out here threatening people that speak out against him. There's no evidence that he's gone and, like, physically injured or threatened any potential witnesses or someone that's spoken ill of him. To come out with 40 different people that don't want to give their name. 40 different people that most of them aren't even firsthand witnesses to Jonathan Majors doing anything. A lot of that article was, oh, hey, I heard that, it got really emotional between him and an ex. They used to tell me. So they're not giving a name. And they have no firsthand knowledge of anything that they're substantiating. But because they're crafting this package of 40 different accusers, you're pushing that idea of, well, why would all of them be lying? Why would all of them be saying this if it wasn't true? Well, listen, every single one of you in the chat right now could say, I stepped on a puppy this morning. And I could be like, well, obviously I didn't do that. But if 40 of you were in the chat saying that and someone came and read my live chat, the idea would be, why would 40 people be saying it? And that's just how it works. And then that guy McFly, hey, by the way, so you're saying that DA Bragg is getting a flashlight shown on him in his office after the handling of migrants and NYPD. So I'm not really paying that much attention to it, but I did hear that even though there's video evidence that the reason only one of them was charged with anything was because they couldn't discern what each person was doing in the video. Now, from a quick glance, they're all wearing different colored clothing, so they know who it was 4 people, right? They know who all was involved, but they still only chose to charge one of them. And I'm just like, but you guys have video. So it's a very weird thing. It's like when video shows something, we just ignore it over here in the Manhattan district. And Artemis says, you saw a short yesterday where someone was saying that Jonathan Majors pushed her and hit her. They left out the whole running clip, so it was easy to egregiously say he attacked her. I was so annoyed. And that's the thing, too. That's the problem with video context. I know the Kyle Rittenhouse trial was highly contentious, but whatever side of the opinion you're on, part of the issue with that trial was the state, the prosecution, was blowing up video stills, skipping frames, and when you zoom in with a certain type of aspect ratio and quality of a video, the pixels start doing all types of different things. It was also ran through some Apple program, so the pixels could have been manipulated and transitioned then. And they're all the way zoomed in, and imagine each of these little lights behind us is a blurred pixel by the time they're zoomed in. And they're asking this black mark there, that's a muzzle flash, right? Or this light here, that's a muzzle flash, right? And they argued about it for 3 hours in this case. And they have all this other video footage, but they were really focused in on one frame from this whole night of surveillance footage. And it's one of those things where I love video evidence because it gives us a little bit more of a look into things, but you can definitely manipulate video evidence. You can definitely be tricked with your eyes with video evidence. That whole, is the dress blue or silver or gold and white? Some people can see something if you say it's there and put the idea in front of them. They can say, oh yeah, I see that. But yeah, so I agree. Like, you've got people on Shorts, probably TikTok too, saying like, look at this one part of the video where they're standing in the door frame. And they're not going to show the second video where the same thing is happening, and that's actually where his pocket's ripping and his buttons are getting popped off. So if we know for a fact that in car 2, in that same kind of tussle right in the door frame of the car, he's clearly the one that walks away with damage to his property and injuries. We don't get that side-by-side comparison or context when people clip this one initial clip of when they first get out of the SUV the first time it stops. And it's terrible. It's annoying. It shows lack of critical thinking. And honestly, maybe manipulation by the person that made that clip, because they would have had to have shut down the clip, shorten the clip, and choose, I'm going to talk about this one part only to my audience. Then Deadline said the jurors sided with the prosecution, but that's not entirely true since they don't believe he was an abuser. Okay, cool. Everything with intent got dropped. Deadline squeezed that in the last line. Of course it's the last line. But to be fair, there are skim readers out here that will do something sort of like, let's see, what window was I on? Let me find a longer article. We'll go back to the Deadline. So say I open this, right? And I'm like, cool, there's a lot of ads here I'm going to skip. I'm going to read the beginning of this paragraph because I'm skimming and it's after a break. I'm just going to go to the bottom and see how they conclude. I might actually be more inclined sometimes to read this last line and the first line than any of the stuff in between. Not me personally when I'm talking about an article, because I like to read all the details. But other things I casually read, skimming through. So let's see. Where do they say this? Acquitted. Okay, the panel acquitted. Okay, so here. I agree with what you're saying, but I think you're adding your intuitive between the lines that all of us here in this chat probably see and agree with, right? We read this and we'll say the panel acquitted Majors of 2 other misdemeanor charges. We're like, cool, we knew that, and that's great. You're pointing out the very thing that suggests the jury didn't subscribe to this idea of a pattern of abuse. But a lot of people reading this, by the time they've read all this garbage, if they read this and say the panel acquitted Majors of 2 other misdemeanor charges, aggravated or intentional assault and harassment, some people kind of need to be told why that's important. And it's not put there in front of them. So if they're not like us and already thinking, well, they acquitted him because they didn't believe this theory of abuse, there's no context right here back and forth saying that this is important because the prosecution argued that there was a pattern of abuse, but the jury acquitted him on these 2 charges. So I'm not saying every person that does a blind read of this that isn't one of us needs that to be told to them, but a lot of people do need that side-by-side context of why this is important. So it's a half win. I'll give them a half win for including that detail, because sometimes people just gloss over it and just say he was found guilty. And then, hey, it's Sheed, you're always here. You're here early today. Thanks for showing up. And then I agree. And then you say the details they leave out is mind-numbing, back to Zach. Hey, Wonder Woman. Yeah, we are here early today. And then Spoiler Kings, any guesses why Jonathan Majors hasn't appealed yet? Is he waiting for the sentencing? I believe he's waiting for the sentencing. And I say that because we could talk here until we're blue in the face about how this should be probation. He has no record. It shouldn't be jail time. But this is a high-profile case. And there's vitriol behind it. We've seen vitriol from the prosecution. This is not a situation where the prosecution's, in my opinion, you couldn't convince me, unless I see them do it themselves, that the prosecution's going to say, hey, in cases like this, typically, when, we have no prior arrest record, there's no convictions on this man's record, we typically just offer probation. And that's what we're suggesting here, Judge. I do not believe that the prosecution's going to go in and make that argument, even though they should. If that's typically what they do in this type of case, that's what they should do for Jonathan Majors. But they won't, because this is a different type of buzz. So I think that the defense attorneys are thinking ahead and knowing that they're probably going to get a sentence that isn't reasonable or normal for this type of verdict, even if the verdict ends up ultimately standing. And then, heck yeah, that's why there's 80 of us calling him out in here. And then Juanita says, Kat, it makes sense if they need to create media justification to incarcerate him, because no matter what they intend to try it. And that goes right back to, Spoiler King's question, waiting to appeal the sentencing. We've seen the press and the prosecution kind of go hand in hand with this Molyneux evidence and creating this theory in the courtroom and then this theory in the press of this pattern of abuse. So for them to know that Jonathan Majors was acquitted of those 2 charges that dispute that argument, the jury didn't find that happened. Now they've got to make his sentencing make sense. And I really think his sentencing is going to be disproportionate to even other black men that may go through and get the same type of charges against them without any criminal record or previous history. I think Jonathan Majors, because it's so high profile and they're annoyed that they challenged the prosecution's decision to take this to trial, they're going to come back and request a disproportionately severe sentencing within their limits. And then Hazel says, can he look for work while he's waiting for sentencing? It's been almost a year. How much do they want him to suffer? And I mean, technically, he could start looking for anything he wants to do, but it's my understanding if you have these big contract roles, you book out a lot of time to film them, right? This is at least several weeks, but up to a couple months of being present for filming. So if you think that that's on the chopping block for you, you're not going to plan in advance to schedule and contract your time. So it's preemptively you lost, it's an opportunity loss. But now he's probably at a point where if he's looking for work currently, he's probably planning shoots to start taking place a few months from now. So it's just, there's a delay with having to pick back up your schedule in that kind of field, because you can't just pick up the phone and be like, hey, I'm down for this project. Let's start recording today. There's usually some time you got to wait to pass. So that sucks. But hopefully he's good about managing his scheduling and his budget. And I don't think he's a stupid guy. I don't think he's untalented, and I don't think he's undriven. I think he'll find a way to be successful no matter what. It's just he is facing a ton of adversity that is completely undeserved. And then the media is fully complicit in screwing this guy over. I agree. And then you guys saw The Messenger got shut down. That was one of Elizabeth Rosner. That was one of the media outlets I was relying on heavily when I was reporting on things like the iCard, Grace Jabari's charges, her, Ross Kramer coming out. The Ross Kramer statement is luckily preserved by Business Insider and one other article, and it's all in my videos. But anything I relied on reporting from The Messenger, who was boots on the ground with information from the NYPD, they shut down. The Messenger just turned off the lights. So we have the one media source that wasn't completely fully complicit in screwing Jonathan Majors over, turned off the lights. They're gone. Isn't that crazy? And then, Wonder Woman, are you saying that it's the new puppy that's... We're going back and trying to figure out what post-conviction Jonathan Majors... what behavior he's engaged in post-conviction that is burying his career even further. It's clearly the puppy. When Jonathan Majors gets his convictions overturned, he needs to get and stay out of New York. They are out for him. Erica, when I do my side, it says everything. That or I just sit back in my seat and cover my face. This is okay, if you guys have seen anything with the Courtney Clenny case, and not exactly Courtney Clenny, but what her defense attorneys are doing, I think I'm this is my new thing for reacting to them. It's just why? And then, let's see. And then, okay, so Anita, so how can they release the Molyneux if they are appealing? What if there's a retrial? So I'm sure that that's part of the request for keeping this sealed, right? On one hand, Judge, we're going to ask you to seal this indefinitely. If you will not consider that, we also want to ask that, keep this sealed through the appeal, because you might think that there's no way that this could taint a jury, but this is still an active case. It's not a closed case because it's still open. We're appealing. And that could mean a jury, a finder of fact, needs to examine this case again if an appeal court grants us the right to retry the case. So they're probably making a, two-way argument there to request the sealing. Permanent, and then also, at least through the appeal, Judge, we got to remind you that this is still an active case, and this would prejudice Jonathan Majors if the case were to be retried. And yeah, Puma, so I haven't really, but I'll go with Dumbo to brag either way. We can call him that either way. What do I think of his dealings with the cops and the asylum seeker? So I haven't followed the details of that case, but it's just my understanding that there is that video. And you can see everyone on it, and they're like, well, we didn't charge everyone because we can't exactly tell what they're doing. But maybe I'm missing something. I haven't looked deep into it. And then, hey, Nick. So this entire thing is so frustrating. Jonathan could breathe and people would be complaining about him. Exactly. You'll see it like on Backward or TMZ. Well, I don't think TMZ's done anything like salacious of walking up to him on the street, but someone somewhere will be like, that abuser breathed today. And then the DA is a real problem. I agree. If you guys saw, I posted a video a few days ago about, it was a 1987 murder case. And the two men, their best friends that were convicted of it, they were exonerated by the post-conviction unit from the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. And DA Alvin Bragg came out and made this like great statement. And the statement in a bubble was great. It was like, yay, post-conviction relief, looking at freeing the innocent. But at the same time, to have that coming from Alvin Bragg's mouth is like, you could just prevent the bad convictions in the first place, bro. Like, post-conviction unit's great, but you could put less work on their plate if you do the right thing from the beginning and how you choose to prosecute. Nobody here likes Alvin Bragg. That's fine. Put a 1 in the chat if you do not like Alvin Bragg. And then, okay, so Juanita, you say it's a deliberate strategy. Delay the media coverage and the mainstream media is working with the DA's office. I agree, especially since you see that the only... it's not clear to me that Deadline was actually in the court. I don't remember. Did they reference reporting from... Deadline might have someone in the court. But otherwise, the only person I'm seeing in the courtroom is from Pix 11. So, and that wasn't one of the 18 reporters that Megan Cuniff was talking about that was sitting in the trial every day. Hey, Lana, good to see you. Thanks for reminding me it's Tuesday. I never know what day it is. And then it's Eliza. So Priya's fighting tooth and nail to get this info permanently sealed. Honestly, as she should. Not all cases involve evidence that stuff is filed under seal anyway, but if it is, you do have to actively request that it won't be unsealed. Right? So if you slip up and you don't make these motions, oops, lid comes off. And then Erica, exactly my point. Dozens and dozens of accusers, but no one can substantiate it. And Andre Ware, yeah, I know Danny is mad. Well, it's like, she got to sit in, I'm saying that like it was a pleasure. She went out of her way and spent her time to sit in the courtroom just to watch the judge not want to sit there and have a full court day. You had people traveling. You have Danny traveling to be present in the courtroom. And then the judge is like, all right, we're going to start at 10:15 today. We're going to take an hour and 15-minute lunch. We're going to talk a little bit. And then, let's just come back tomorrow at 10:15. Like that day that they started deliberations again at 10:15. Extenuating circumstance with the juror. But it was like, that judge probably would not survive in a court that went from 9 to 5. I've watched trials where the judge will be like, jurors, are you okay? Can we go till 6:30 today? And then they sit there and they keep it going. They just keep going through the testimony. They get the witnesses done. They keep moving along. But we didn't see that in this trial that shouldn't have been 2 weeks long at all. If you're paying attention to the YSL trial at all, that's another one. That's already supposed to be a 6-month trial. That case is going to go over a year because... One, the state keeps trying to introduce new evidence that's non-evidence, in my opinion. Mostly like new song lyrics. Can we bring in? No. Not the defense. The state's trying to introduce new evidence. But the judge is just, all right, we're going to have a delay today. We're going to have a delay today. You're keeping a jury here for 6 months from your first estimate. And now you're cutting hours off entire days, multiple days. That's going to add days to the trial. With a jury that's already supposed to be there for 6 months. It's just a mess. And then, let's see. I want to say, so Juanita's asking about making an account of journalists who misreport on the Jonathan Majors case. So Blabette has been really good at that. If you just search Blabette on X, if she doesn't come up right away, search my tweets for Blabette, and you'll be able to find her profile. She's done a lot compiling the different journalists and how they covered the cases. And I'm also, I think, like, Juanita, going off something you said in a comment on another video, doing a dive and bringing to the surface some of the stuff that Blabette has uncovered about an Armie Hammer accuser who goes by Effie on Twitter. I think that's actually short for her real name, but her handle on Twitter, on X, is Effie. She, and Blabette has all the screenshots, she's part of this like crowdsourcing community of people that go out and crowdsource when someone highly profiled is accused of, you know, a crime, sexual assault, whatever, something Me Too related. They go out and they crowdsource these accusations to try to find other accusers or other things that go against the character of the person being accused. Now, Effie, who accused Armie Hammer, is part of this community. She said so herself. I have suspicions, and this is just my own suspicion, that people like Ella Dawson, who has really raised hell about Priya Chaudhry for representing Adam Foss. She's one of the Me Too's of Adam Foss, even though her only experience was, you know, he wanted to take me out on a date, and I was a victim of him wanting to fuck me. It's her words on her Patreon blog post. That's what she's a victim of. They never actually did anything together. But she says she's a victim like Reagan Seeley because of that. But she's also been very outspoken about Jonathan Majors being a strangler from the strangulation charge. She was late to correcting that. She was still saying it sometime in the fall. And she's been very against this case, Priya Chaudhry representing him, all that. It's my speculation that these people, these other bloggers, like Ella Dawson, I think she's part of this underground community. Effie is the one who said, I went and brought this information to Cheyenne Roundtree, speaking about the other Jonathan Majors accusers. And Blabette had it all screenshotted. Effie's like deleted the posts ever since. She's always deleting posts. But Juanita pointed out, hey, if we can get a video out there and put it up there, we can kind of contextualize some of that stuff if and when this Molyneux evidence is unsealed by the judge. So very good suggestion by Juanita. For you guys, there's 90 of you in here that are unaware of that. That's really insane stuff, right? You've got one person finding other people to try to crowdsource claims. This isn't the prosecution or the state doing an investigation. This isn't the police doing an investigation. This is people in a private community that are targeting, you know, high profile accusations, Me Too cases, and trying to crowdsource statements of, he was a dick on set. He was an asshole on set. Oh, I think he did something once, I heard maybe through the grapevine. And then they're bringing it to journalists for the journalists to do an expose of. And then we're getting stories like what we saw from Cheyenne Roundtree. That's how those things are coming to the surface. Do you think that that's good journalism? The floor is yours. I mean, I bet there's an instance or two that pop up once in a while where someone is a genuine victim and maybe their evidence isn't enough. And someone's able to find someone and say, hey, if you could share your story, this could really help bring justice to someone, to another actual victim. I'm sure that's true once in a while. But I don't think it's true across the board, and I don't think we should ever use something that's unsubstantiated to frame an entire narrative. And then, yeah, a lot of people, oh my god, I'm getting to the ones. Look at you guys. Look at all the ones. That's too funny. I mean, I didn't suggest putting a 2 if you don't, as an alternative, but I don't see any 2s, so... And then, yeah, Cousin Carl, so that's great. So, and by the way, Date Her, Don't Get Married. So you probably have a good channel. I want to come check that out. Can you do me a favor and leave a static comment, like, on my channel after this is done? That way I can click your channel and, like, come subscribe to it. Sorry if that's, like, extra work, but it doesn't let me click right here to go to your channel and subscribe now. But you say DA dropped charges against Jabari because of the 1994 Violence Against Women's Act. And that's one of the things too, right? Where we saw the prosecution speaking to the media as if this counter complaint, the cross complaint that Jonathan Majors brought against Grace Jabari, that 2 different NYPD detectives and in different precincts found probable cause for, right? They came out, the DA said, without their own prosecutorial investigation, just flat out said, we're not going to prosecute those. They framed it as Darvo tactics, that this is something that, victimizers typically do to the people that they abuse. They flip the script and reverse it and accuse them, and it's unsubstantiated. Well, the prosecution never actually did any investigation to determine whether or not Jonathan Major's cross complaint was actually that. And meanwhile, we have 2 NYPD detectives saying, no, there was probable cause for the arrest. We're issuing the I-card. So, but yeah, this Violence Against Women's Act is a big part of that. And then Ada says, I think Jonathan can get his career back in the future since the public is so obsessed with him. He can turn that into a profit. I mean, I hope so. And honestly, sometimes independent projects are the better projects. I mean, this is totally unrelated to Law and Crime, but we had Andre 3000 be like, yeah, I used to write like some fire music. It was like pop, rap, hip hop. And then I'm going to just play the flute. And it was like top of the charts, right? So, sometimes people coming out and honing in on their passion or their craft does really well. So I don't think that's an avenue that he has any roadblocks to his success of just pure talent, skill, determination, and people that are out there and have an appreciation for him, let alone people that also believe he's innocent. I think he has the drive to make it, doing whatever he puts his mind to. It just always will suck, and I will never say it doesn't suck. That he just got slapped with something he didn't deserve that should never have been taken to trial. And in fact, I think he deserves justice because I think he was assaulted and they let his assaulter get away with it. And then, so the Geek Chef, the larger problem with him, and I like food too. What do you cook on your channel? The larger problem with America is sensitive society, cancer society, and the need for some form of hype. This man's crime is a scuffle with a woman. He is guilty, no, but it makes headlines. Yeah, and that's the thing. You're calling it a scuffle, but I've seen some other reports refer to it as a scuffle. And if you ask me, scuffle's the kind of word I use where 2 people are kind of in a mess and you can't really discern what's going on. So if there's this phrase, a scuffle is very different from someone getting pounded into the pavement or curb stomped, right? That's one person doing it to the other person. Scuffle is just a blurred 2 ways. It's unclear. So for us to even be seeing this type of distinct language, we just instinctively use this distinct language that it's not even clear what's going on, and yet he's facing prison time for it. That's crazy in itself. Okay, we've got some more ones. And then Queen, I'm glad you see it with the YSL trial. It is a hot mess. Prosecutors are not meeting burden at all. If you want me to sum up the YSL trial, because it's very long, it's pretty much the prosecution going, oh, hey, we have a police officer on the stand. Did you see anyone ever throw up a gang sign? Yeah, we did. And then the defense gets up there and be like, hey, officer, you said you saw people throwing up a gang sign. What was the gang sign? And then the witness will just be like, I don't know. Like, okay, so how would you know if that sign was really for gang affiliation and that person making any signs with their hand relates to anyone else here in this courtroom? And then for the other witnesses, there's a bunch of witnesses that are being brought up there. There are people that have been arrested for like small amounts of different drugs, usually pills like Percocets or weed, and there's been like one that had like cocaine, but they're asking like, was it weight or was it just like personal use? They're like, it wasn't weight. I wouldn't call it weight. And these people have done their time or they've taken their plea deals or whatever. And then they'll ask them something like, and were you at a concert in the same building with this other person who's charged of a crime? And they're like, well, yeah, I was there for the concert. And then the state will be like, see, we got you. Like, the case is just a mess. And it's a RICO trial. This isn't just one person being charged with one crime. There's like 68 counts in this trial and multiple co-defendants. And the prosecution's case is basically, the cops say they saw gang signs 3 years ago from one person. And the witnesses that all signed plea deals saying that they couldn't testify truthfully to anyone charged in the 68 charge indictment. They can't testify to anyone's innocence, any of them, for any of the charges. Those are their witnesses. So if you have a lot of time on your hands and a lot of popcorn, go check out the YSL trial. It's very interesting. And then 8-4 sentence that... Okay, do you mean Boosie? Or Bootsy? Do you mean Bootsy? Or is Bootsy like another person I don't know of? Let me know. Okay, and instead of one, Ghost says Alvin's Uncle Ruckus brags. Okay, that's a term I've never heard. So Cousin Carl says that legally it's called mutual affray. Affray? Probably affray. Like afraid, but without the D. That's interesting. I didn't know there was a term for it, so you just taught me something. We're still getting more ones. And then a bunch of ones from Ghost. And then Ada, yeah, the YSL case is a mess. They are serious. And then the judge in the YSL trial is biased too. The defense can't catch a break. And what's interesting is I had more time to watch a lot of the pretrial hearings because it's not a federal case, guys. You're hearing RICO, but it's state. It's Fulton County. And so we get some transparency. We have cameras in the courtroom, which they're trying to fight. During all of the pretrial hearings, the judge was actually a bit more reasonable, in my opinion. They were having full trial days. His decisions seemed to make sense to me. He was very quick with them. He was very quick to press back on the state when they tried to misrepresent a statute. He was very quick to, if the state just tried to object all willy-nilly without offering grounds for their objection, he would just be like, I'm overruling your objection. I'm not playing that game. Whereas now that the trial has started, we're seeing him offer grounds on behalf of the state. So the state isn't substantiating the reason for their objections, but the judge will be like, oh, I'll sustain that on other grounds. Like, it's a weird thing to say, but whatever. And if anything, for the record, if you're going to ask someone their grounds, you should let them come up with their grounds, even if you say like, hey, we need to approach whatever. But yeah, so very interesting with the judge over there. I do think it's interesting. He seems to have a little, maybe he's just sick of this. Maybe he's going to retire after this trial. I don't know, but he seems way more checked out and a little bit worse in his performance than I remember from the pretrial hearing. So that was a weird shift that I noticed from that time period to now. Because we're what, like day 24 or 25 into the actual trial now. I'm in Atlanta. They need to focus on the Trump RICO. So Erica, I heard that, you know, the new prosecution's mission, they have this huge budget to deal with this 200,000 case backlog in Fulton County. And instead they're choosing to focus on 4 RICO charges. One of them is going to be the Trump one, which you know that's going to take time. It's going to be in the press. It's going to be a long and resource intense trial, no matter what comes of it. You have YFN Lucci, who is pled out. You have the YSL trial, which is still ongoing and it's a hot mess. And I don't know what the 4th one is. But they have this huge budget and 200,000 cases on backlog. So that means people, victims and the people that are charged or waiting to be indicted. Life in limbo. That's just sitting there. Budget's going to these 4 cases, now 3 because the one's pled out. That's crazy to me. 200,000 cases in the backlog. And then Ernest Claiborne says, Alvin Bragg needs to go. I can't wait until the chickens come home to roost for him. I mean, when is his election up? Because he came in just a couple years ago now at this point. I don't know, I'm bad at like searching things like that. What's the frequency of those elections for DA? Oh, hold on. There's an article that came up from the New York Post. Hold on, I don't know what I'm sharing. This is a blind share. Oh, this is from 2022. It was the first thing that came up, though. It said how Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg could get removed from office. Yeah, I don't think we have any forward motion with that. But yeah, so not sure on that. And let me also check if we have any update from any of these articles with more details about what happened this morning. But yeah, I don't know how frequently the elections for district attorney are in Manhattan are. All right, so People and The Wrap both have new articles, and it looks like The Independent updated. You know how I love People magazine. Let's take a look at what they're saying. So they're saying Jonathan, sorry about this giant ad. Jonathan Major's domestic violence sentencing is postponed weeks after guilty verdict. Cool. So, Emily Palmer, familiar face, the one that was making fun of Priya Chaudhry's courtroom attire. Creed 3 actor was originally slated for Tuesday for sentencing. Was postponed by a slew of post-conviction motions. Slew is kind of a word with negative connotations, if you ask me. Not that severely negative, but... Jonathan Major's sentencing is delayed. People's confirming it themselves. Let's see. They do specify that he was found not guilty of misdemeanor assault and the misdemeanor aggravated harassment. So shout out to that, I guess. And then any more details? Just saying he spoke out for the first time in the GMA. He lost his Dennis Rodman film. Oh, what? Hold on, we have a new quote. Have you guys ever seen this quote from Closing? Okay, everyone, let's read this. So they're talking about the case. They're saying in the call, Majors told the 911 dispatcher he did not know what happened to Jabari. She's unconscious, Majors said it in audio of the call. She's naked from the bottom down. She has a sweatshirt on. She's my ex-partner. We broke up. I came back. She sent me text messages insinuating as much. Police arrive. He was arrested in his living room. Okay, so we never got to see the end of the body cam footage. They're going to arrest him presumably downstairs in that first floor where I said the suitcase was sitting. So Majors was arrested in his living room. So either that details in the report or it was said somewhere in trial, or there is video of this that we didn't get to see. Police arrived. That's not the point I was woeing about, though. Police arrived at the couple's Manhattan penthouse minutes later. Jabari went to the hospital and was treated for a hairline fracture to a bone in her middle finger and a cut to her ears. Oh, I just read that. I'm sorry. This part is my woe part. This is from closing statements. So we're getting this detail from closing statements that I don't remember reading. This is not a he said, she said case, Assistant District Attorney Kelli Galaway told the jury. This is a she said plus. So in closing, Kelli Galaway was insinuating the existence of more Me Too accusers. I didn't know this detail. Can you guys let me know if you knew this detail? Put a 1 if you did not know this detail. Put a 2 if you knew this specific detail, this statement from closing arguments. And remember, closing arguments are not supposed to be considered as evidence of fact for the jury to decide as factual. I have never heard this before. I'm going to pull up this. We can look at this right now. I pulled up this little tab here where it's linking to another article on closing statements. We can go through and see if we missed anything. Right, okay, so we have a ton of 1s. What do you guys think about this detail? And hold on, while you guys are writing up what you think about this detail, I'm going to tweet X post. That's some bullshit. Yeah, also, if it's a she said plus case, why the hell wasn't it admitted during the case? She would be able to speak to that firsthand. Another case of hiding the facts. Are they trying to say said plus the supporting witnesses? Yeah, I'm thinking this is referencing that Molyneux evidence packet with the 40 Rolling Stone variety accusers. Because they have nothing. Other Me Too victims, but didn't the main one Grace lie nonstop? Yep. And I'm telling you this, I don't know who the district attorney was in the let me go back to this. You guys have it on your screen, the People magazine, but let me go back to get out of this Twitter. I just told Twitter. I'm going to ask Twitter if they've heard this closing statement part. Because I think that's crazy. I think it's tough because it's in a closing argument, but Closing arguments, things you say in it can be appealable arguments. They're referencing something right there that was ordered not admissible. I mean, like, think about that. The inference there is in reference to something that was ruled inadmissible. That Priya Chaudhry is making a motion to remain sealed while the case is at least still active and even after appeals close. And then we're hearing in closing arguments, which I never knew this detail before because I don't have transcripts of the closing arguments. Maybe I can get those. I'll have to check. I'm sure, I think it was Casey. I don't know, but I'm sure we can come across those. Because I would put this front and center on an appeal. Because you're referencing inadmissible evidence in your closing argument. I'm like mad right now. That's a huge detail. Can you say basically anything in closing remarks and opening remarks? Sort of. You can say a lot more than, and obviously arguments are a way for the prosecution to kind of say things that, it's to give you an idea, a timeline to follow. You want to be structured in it. You want to hint to people in opening arguments what they should be on the look for. And then in closing arguments, you want to instruct them how they should come to their decision, right? So you're going to have a jury form in front of you that's going to tell you need to do this. And I'm going to read step 1 and step 2 and step 3. You have to do all of these things, right? You want to iterate those types of things in closing and make sure they go into the deliberations with a clear idea of what they're tasked with doing. But you can't, it's just not a free-for-all with opening and closing statements either. You can't just go in and make accusations out of the blue, especially with something that's completely unfounded. So in opening statements, you saw creative licensing a bit with, we're going to find out that he slammed Grace Jabari against the SUV like a football. Giving that inference that she was being slammed against like the exterior framing of the side of the door or something like that more than once. And Grace Jabari kind of tried to testify to that, and then she cleaned it up and said, well, no, it was really just I bumped my head on the frame while I was being put back in the car one time. So that's a gray area where it was like kind of hyperbolized and dressed up and added flair in the opening statements. Did it cross the line? No. We can disagree with that characterization, but probably didn't cross the line of opening statements. But this, in closing statements, telling the jury that there's more victims and you need to come back with a verdict because there's more victims. Thank God they acquitted him of 2 charges. But they still got him on 2. And maybe they felt like they had to stick him with something because they didn't know what to make of this statement. And we'll never know unless the jury decides to come out and tell us. But let's see what you guys are reacting to this. So closing arguments or testimony now. Yeah, it's like the DA is like testifying on behalf of these people that never showed up and that their anonymous statements to Rolling Stone were ruled inadmissible. Also, I think they knew the case was weak, but hoped to sell the idea it isn't about what he did, but potential about what he could do one day or something. Yeah, it's that whole idea of something must have happened, right? And that's easy to believe if you characterize him as initially the reports were him strangling his girlfriend until she passed out. So people have this image of him being like violent and burly and abusive towards this frail, innocent white woman. So when you come out and say like, okay, well, maybe Grace was lying about her part in it, but what about these other 40 people? Well, we're going to believe one of them because it's easy to believe against him and the numbers are there. And then Ada, yep, so well, didn't they lie about the driver too in their opening? I don't believe nothing they said. Okay, so what's interesting about that is not what they predicted he was going to say, right? Because it seems like they may have been referencing something that he said in a statement or an interview with them, and we could have just lost something in the translation. Same way we didn't get that she was acting like a psycho, where the driver said she was acting like a psycho girl to the prosecution in a statement to them. We don't get that language, and either he was told he couldn't say it, or it's just not the type of translation that came forward. But we didn't get that type of language. So there could be multiple reasons for this, but you're still on the money here, because in closing, they come up and they're like, oh, and you can't believe anything the driver said, the one we called, because he was paid by Jonathan Majors. Listen. And then Arbiko, that might be proof they are silent supporters of trying to leak this info to the public. Artemis, it was inadmissible and she was still allowed to reference it in closing. That's the crazy part. Is because this isn't just saying like, look, this is a pattern of someone who often loses their temper no matter who's around, which could imply the involvement of other people experiencing his behavior, right? That's very different than saying, this is a she said plus. This is not a he said, she said, he assaulted me in the car case. This is a she said plus. And this case is about serious charges. Assault. And he wasn't found guilty. He was acquitted of this, but with intent to cause physical injury. And remember, this started with like 8 full charges with strangulation involved. So initially, if they're saying this is a she said plus, we know that there were 8 charges to start with. And then Callie Galaway is coming along and still saying this is a she said plus. But you've had to drop all these charges in the same vein. And then Ruby Red, hey, you just tuned into us stumbling upon some crazy statement and closing arguments that we didn't know was said. They're trying to submit non-info to influence people. Ernest Claybon says, I thought the case was just to justify the arrest. I think even the prosecutor was surprised they won. A little bit. I don't know. I think sometimes people think their shit don't stink. So I wonder. I'm sure they're glad that they didn't lose with the full acquittal. But I feel like they were shocked that they didn't secure all 4 charges. And that's something I see people talk about a lot. Ruby Red, why wasn't Will Smith taken away in handcuffs when he assaulted Chris Rock? I mean, I think a lot of people assumed it was staged. Like, and previously consented to until it shook out in that moment. And then maybe by the time something came of it, they just said, oops. But if it was a man and a woman, I don't think that would have happened. Especially, that was filmed in Los Angeles, right? California doesn't really play about the Me Too stuff either. And then, yeah, Artemis says, Priya called Jabroni a liar, but that's because it was actually true. Agreed. I mean, we can find the inconsistencies within her testimony. From within that courtroom, from that 4 days, 3 days, really, if you don't count redirect. And then you say, always make the black American men look bad. And that's kind of like how I feel about all the reporting on this case. And I think the prosecution just adapted that as part of their case. Implicitly, maybe. But they did argue in the courtroom in response to a motion to dismiss mid-trial, hey, the intent is clear on his face. So there's grounds enough, Judge, for you to let this case move forward and let the jury decide and deliberate on the charges we're putting forth. The intent was on his face. In a video where you can't see his face. And then let's see. And then Let Love Rain says, wow, these imaginary victims have a lot of power. Always and forever. You can't, what are they? You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Yeah, the Killer Mike thing is crazy to me. Like, honestly, like, I don't know. I hope nothing comes of it. I heard on X saying it was, like, related to some type of prostitution charge or participation. I don't know if that means he hired somebody. It's just what I heard anyway. But I don't even know what the specific charge was from what I heard. That was, like, the general gist of it. And it's just like, you know, I was just watching the show Power. Raising Kanan, and Jukebox, one of the characters in there, played by Haley Kilgore, her voice is so good. She's like, finally, her family life sucks. She's trying to do the right thing. She doesn't want to make herself go into the army. She wants to give it one last shot to do this like singing performance career. And she has her first big break at a mall, and they're performing, and everything's great. And her and the 2 other girls in the group, the girl that hates her, finally is like, you did good, Juke. Like, finally, everything's coming together for this girl. And then they're peeking through the curtain and they see their manager speaking with 3 guys in suits. And they're like, oh my God, what record label do you think they're from? And so they come behind and they're like, Laverne, I forget her last name, but her real name, Laverne something. They're like, we need to speak with you. We're with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And it's like, damn. And then 2 nights later, I see Killer Mike, this story where he has a sweep. What'd he get? Three Grammys? Right? Killer Mike got 3 Grammys, right, guys? And then the next thing you know, he's being arrested right in the arena or the theater, wherever the Grammys are hosted. And I was like, damn, this just happened to Juke in Power. Like, fiction is really based in reality. But yeah, that was a crazy scene to see. I mean, hopefully nothing comes of it. And honestly, most of the reaction I saw to it was pretty critical of that happening there and so publicly. And then, yeah, I don't know about that Alvin Bragg case specifically, but I mean, I don't really like end up feeling too favorably about any Alvin Bragg case I look into. So not to broad stroke my characterization, my perception to something I don't know about, but just saying I wouldn't have high hopes going into it that I'm going to come out being like, oh, I understand why Alvin Bragg does what he does. And then he said to TMZ it was an overzealous security guard. They have footage that seems to support that. Wait, so this is talking about Killer Mike, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Let's see. And yep, he got 3 Grammys. He got into a fight with a bodyguard. So who was on X misleading me? I'm repeating it to you guys. Let me scratch everything I say about what I heard on X about something with some LA sting. But a fight with the bodyguard. Okay, so a fight with the bodyguard, wants to press charges. We'll see. And I guess it's technically criminal, but there are those times where you hear like someone wants to sue someone civilly. They used to be a bodyguard for them or something, and then they want to sue him civilly like a long time after they stop doing bodyguard work or security work for the person, to come out and say like, oh, I want to sue for a settlement for emotional damage. Here, let's pull up. Okay, so let me see. It's going to become a Killer Mike stream momentarily. Oh, I love their... Okay, so their title on Google just says the reason for his arrest. Hold on, let me just subscribe to them because I read enough articles. I'm not dealing with having to incognito and get around a paywall every 2 seconds. And I'll pull up the article in a second. But yeah, fight over what? And we'll see. Maybe it'll give us some details. That's crazy. You win 3 Grammys and then you're up there getting arrested. Like you can't win. Someone literally wins, and then immediately a shadow chases after you just to shadow your win. Oh, sweet. And it's only $1 to subscribe. They're probably going to like change their rates here. But I do read the LA Times quite often, so whatever. I don't know. Let me do it incognito because... Let's see. There we go. We're in. So they just say flat out, here's the reason why. So rapper Killer Mike has been released from police custody hours after he was detained, escorted out by Los Angeles police on Sunday. An LAPD spokesperson confirmed to The Times that the entertainer, half of rap duo Run the Jewels, was handcuffed and placed under arrest at Crypto.com Arena in downtown Los Angeles shortly after 4 p.m. He was booked for misdemeanor battery. An altercation allegedly broke out after a security guard tried to keep the rapper and his entourage from passing through an area in the venue. Okay, so this is taking place... This incident, this misdemeanor battery, is taking place within the Grammys arena, the Crypto.com arena. A source close to the investigation told The Times on Monday it's unclear why the guard prevented access. The musician, 48, allegedly engaged in an altercation with the security guard who was knocked down to the ground. The guard injured her hand in the fall and requested a citizen's arrest. Police were called to the scene. The investigation is ongoing. A representative for Killer Mike did not respond to the Times' multiple requests for comments. So I'm assuming there's probably video of her on the ground. Is it clear that... Is this video out? So let's see. Let's see if you guys... Because you guys have the tea on this more than I do. Yeah, so we got the reason why there. It's misdemeanor battery, and this security guard, she was knocked to the ground, and she requested a citizen's arrest, and then the police came. And then... Yeah, her hand. Yeah, I peeped that too. Yeah, so my take is if there's video of this and there's supposed to be some crowd, because it does say his entourage, right? The rapper and his entourage. But it could be a less condensed area of the venue. But I'm curious to see if you can actually see Killer Mike being the one to initiate this. Or, you know, maybe if that's who she recognized, or he was like, this is my badge, this is who I am, this is my staff. So that's the name that she provided. And the investigation has to go further. But here, to be honest, it's not even clear that he was the one that knocked it down. Pay attention to this language. And shout out to LA Times here, even though I criticized them earlier. It's a different reporter. The musician allegedly engaged in an altercation. So this is having something to do with this altercation with the security guard. And then they say the security guard who was knocked to the ground. They don't say that this part of the complaint is substantiating that it was Mike that pushed her to the ground. So they probably got the report, took him in. It's possible it may not have even been him. And then if it is, we have to go from there. But yeah, so much ado about nothing. And look, I would always just advise, just be careful, like, pushing anybody, right? But I'm thinking about this, and then I'm thinking about how we just heard, thanks to Miranda James, she sent over an article about Courtney Clenny. After the stabbing of Christian Obumseli, she moves to Texas, and she's walking around drunk one night, sees a neighbor outside of the house he lives at. He's 18 years old. She goes up to him and she's like, "Hey, can you walk me home?" And he says, she's visibly drunk. She starts demanding that this kid kiss her, this 18-year-old kiss her. So that's an adult, right? But still 18 versus what? She's like approaching her 30s. It's a little bit of a difference, nothing illegal, but you're 30, drunk, walking up to a stranger, asking them to walk you home. They start to walk you home because you're a drunk girl in the middle of the street. And then you start demanding that he kisses you. And then he's like, "What?" and refuses. And then she gets weird and she's like, "Kiss me," and keeps insisting and gets belligerent. And then starts saying, "I'm going to burn that shit down. I'm going to burn your house down. I'm going to burn your house down." The kid texts his dad. The dad comes out of the house. The kid, the 18-year-old, the dad comes out of the house. And that's kind of why it's important, right? I keep saying kid because the dad is another party. They live in the same residence. The dad comes out of the house, sees what's going on. Courtney Clenny begins arguing with him and eventually ends up like shoving and pushing him. So the cops are called. The dad calls the police. And then the dad doesn't want to press charges. And now he's come out and said it, and there's a report, there's a sheriff's report. So it's not just something completely made up. There's a weird statement from the mom on that. But this guy came forward now. The father was like, "Look, at that time, we didn't want to press charges because like we looked at her, we felt bad for her. We thought she was kind of just having a moment. But now we heard the news and we feel bad that we didn't say something sooner." And we learned now that this seems like a disturbed person because now they heard the news of, she was arrested and what she was charged with. But here it's just like this woman falls to the ground. And I guess if you get pushed, you have the right to say, "Hey, can you guys do a citizen's arrest?" And the police are going to, if you get pushed by somebody, that is some type of battery, right? But there was no hesitation here to lock this down and get someone booked up. But then we hear with Courtney Clenny, two different people. There was a neighbor that lived downstairs in an apartment she used to live in Texas with Christian, that they used to hear them fight all the time. And one day, like a painting, they heard glass breaking or something, and a painting fell from the balcony and landed in their balcony. So somehow it must have like flopped over the balcony and spun and landed in front of them. And they still had this painting. And that neighbor said, this different neighbor said the same thing, like, hey, we did call the police about noise complaints, but we didn't really know who was doing what. And now, knowing everything that's happened now, we wish we pursued it more than just making that one call, because now we see this is a really disturbed person, and, you know, we could have said something. So guys, if you see something, say something. So according to Kelli, we have 2 known witnesses from separate instances that were like, we didn't really like pursue repercussions. We didn't want to press charges. But then you have these stories where it involves a man and a woman gets pushed down and it's instantaneous. Just instantaneous. And again, that's not me saying that people should get pushed down and not be able to ask for help. I'm just saying it's not completely clear that it was him that even did it, but they booked him up really, really quick without hesitation. So yeah, wow, that's crazy. And then, hey, Drea, how are you? And then, yeah, so that's the Killer Mike update there. Let me do a quick Jonathan Majors search and see. Actually, let's go back. We were looking at a People article that linked to another article on closing statements. Do you guys want to take a look at that and see if with that detail that we now learned about closing statements, do you want to see if we get any more from the closing statement argument that they linked to? Where was that People article? Because this was the one that we were looking at. Anything else? They talk about the text messages again. So in closing statements, Galaway flashed the text messages again, calling himself a monster and a horrible man. Reading the text messages, Galaway also played the audio. And this is all about closing statements. Galaway also played audio of Majors in a previous recorded fight. Is not how I would characterize it, with Jabari calling himself a great man and saying he needed a Michelle Obama or Coretta Scott King to support him. They're going to call it out! In the GMA interview, Majors once again referenced Martin Luther King Jr.'s wife, calling his current girlfriend Megan Good a Coretta. Good, 42, has not publicly commented on her relationship with Majors. I mean, I guess technically she hasn't commented on it, but her Instagram posts with him and the dog are like very cutesy and lovey. So I guess technically she hasn't made a statement, but and then they linked over, and I think I actually read this article back on December 14th. So yeah, Priya Chaudhry says that the officers took a look at Mr. Majors and made up their mind in closing statements. Yeah, there's nothing new. This is an older article that they interlinked to. This is not a revenge plot to take away a man's career or ruin his life, Galaway told the jury, noting that Jabari had spent the first few days after the March incident trying to protect Majors by telling emergency responders she didn't know what happened to her and refusing to cooperate with prosecutors. That contradicts the text messages now that we looked at them, because in that text message, Grace Jabari herself admits that she only told them not to go forward with the strangulation charge. Is that the actions of a woman whose sole intent is to take a man down, to not cooperate? Oh, but we have a whole article about her cooperating from Erin Tierney. Let me see. I can pull that up right here. Where's my long list of Jonathan Majors articles? Speaking of, does that sound like someone that doesn't want to cooperate? So we have right here. Now this is back on, when was this published? October 25th, 2023. Meanwhile, Jabari is expected to surrender to police outside a police precinct in Chelsea Wednesday on third-degree domestic assault charges that Majors filed a cross-complaint against her. Manhattan Assistant District Attorney Aaron Tierney has vowed not to prosecute any charges that the NYPD brings against the movement coach. The prosecutors acknowledge that she struck an informal agreement with Jabari to have her testify against Majors at trial. You know, cooperate. And then we have this one here. Let's see. There's another article here from Insider from the 24th. Let's see. Is this the one with Kramer? Yeah, so before she's actually arrested, before the DA does any investigation into the probable cause that the NYPD found, we have this email. We intend to decline to prosecute any charges brought by the New York Police Department against Miss Grace Jabari related to allegations made by Jonathan Majors regarding the incident that took place on March 23rd, 2023. Tierney wrote in a September email, now in the case file. Now, of course, there's no elaboration on why they declined to cooperate. Let's see. And I've got one more. So I'd have to go to my video. So, the messenger. Since they shut down. So I have those videos, and maybe it's on like Who Is. Let's see. I mean, Internet Archive. So I have this recorded in my video. I think I have screenshots of it too. But this article where Ross Kramer was quoted saying we were promised no legal repercussions. She's cooperating. The messenger is shut off. They no longer exist. Let me see if there's a way back. No, unfortunately not. And that's my own doing. I could have been more diligent. Or maybe I am getting a hit. Actually. One snapshot. Let's see. All right. So to show you guys, I'm on the Internet Archive. And it's showing that there are snapshots of this URL. But for whatever reason, it's just not loading for me. So maybe there's just something going on right now with this. Oh, are we going? Let's see. Aha! They have it archived! Well, I'm going to save this link. So we have the actual link for posterity there because the messenger is no longer in existence. But here, this is where we have this quote from Ross Kramer. Please tell me this is the right article. Aha, it is. Okay, yay! So, the movement coach entered the building at 5:47 p.m. with her attorney, Ross Kramer. That's the pro bono attorney that's associated with SFFNY, the nonprofit for DV victims. The messenger can confirm. She exited shortly after 8 p.m. Eastern. It's very re-traumatizing to be in the spotlight when you did nothing to put yourself in the spotlight, Kramer told the messenger of his client. So it was a hard night, but hopefully this part of the case is over, and she'll go forward with the DA's office and whatever they need her to do in connection with the other case. She's been very cooperative. So, you know, going back to people, is this the actions of a woman whose sole intent is to take a man down to not cooperate? Arguing that she tried to protect Majors by telling emergency responders she didn't know what had happened to her and refusing to cooperate with prosecutors. But yet, we kind of heard them argue that she supposedly did tell the first responders. So which one is it? And then that's the end of the article. And again, this was from December 14th. This was people reporting on the closing arguments. So let's see what you guys are peeping over here. Ada said, and I think this is before we started talking about the closing arguments, but do you think people will want to work with Grace after all of this? Because the bigger picture is she can't be trusted. And I agree that she can't be trusted, but I also think her friend circle, and maybe rightfully so, believes her situation, believed her story, felt like they didn't know what was going on because Jabari and the prosecution tried to frame it as isolation, but their relationship was only about like a year and change. They broke up several times, it seemed. They had distance from each other several times. They were traveling and living on different continents at different times. So they have like a scrambled year of time together. And the friends, obviously, if Grace Jabari is going to Los Angeles to go hang out with Jonathan Majors for a few weeks at a time, necessarily that would mean she's not spending every day with her friends. So she used that as a way to frame this idea that she was isolated, which I completely disagree with. But at the same time, that does mean you are spending less time with your friends. Your friends are not always with you and meeting you and being around you while you're with Jonathan Majors. So they rightfully could have just said, hey, we don't know what went on and we're just going to believe our friend at face value. But I think now there's a problem because if you look at the way she testified, those transcripts weren't public until we all came along and said, hey, we're going to look at these because something's not adding up about what this girl is saying. Now those transcripts are out there. She's saying certain things that might raise red flags for the friends that believed her at face value, if they pay attention at all. The other thing is, a lot of the work she's done was either recorded before the verdict came down, or before she testified, rather. That's more important, right? Her testimony matters more than the verdict, because her testimony is her story, her words, her telling something. The pretty white lies, as in Chaudhry's language. With that, she had some work with her former friends. She did some work with, Holly, Bentati, all part of Box Artist Management. And then she had some work that she recorded before she testified. I'm not sure if she has any other work pending or on the way right now. I wouldn't doubt that she has stuff in the works, but I think now if anyone with 2 cents is looking at any single drop of her testimony or has searched her name on YouTube, I hope it's one of my videos that comes up and they can take a look at that. Because they should not be looking to work with this woman to give her some type of sympathy or help or handout because they think she was the victim of something. I hope if they're going to offer her work, they do it knowing that she testified with multiple inconsistencies, in my opinion, lied about her ex-boyfriend because she did not want their relationship to end. And then she had to work backwards and clean up why she actually assaulted him that night. So, Ada, I can't say that people won't work with Grace, but I think her chances of people working with her because she's some starlet that is now discovered, oh, she's so talented, and we wouldn't have known about her without this trial. I think maybe she wanted that to happen, and I don't think it's going to happen. I think she might get work with her continued talent management from Bentati and Holly Blakey. But other stuff, I'm not so sure. And I keep noticing everyone calling her an actor in news articles now. Which I guess I agree. She's made her position very clear she was by his side. Oh, and so talking about Megan. So Erica said, Megan's made her position very clear she was by his side with GMA interview. Yeah, imagine in the court of law. The prosecutor can say something like, hey, the intent was on his face that we can't even see in the video. But we have People magazine saying, it doesn't really look like Megan hasn't said anything to support him. But I mean, even though she's been in like the room recording all these interviews with him. Like, let's pretend that the obvious isn't right in front of us. Yeah, so Drea. So that was fun transcripts to read. So, and again, we don't have the audio. We can only ascertain the order of questioning based on the way Priya Chaudhry asked her line-by-line questions while she had the headphones on to listen to the audio playback herself. So, I'm so confused right now. Was the first thing she said in response to them asking her name. So, hey, you're coming too. What is your name? I'm so confused right now. Well, no shit, because you didn't expect police to be standing over you when you were laying there texting your friend Holly. But then it goes on, like, she starts saying she doesn't know what happened. She starts asking things like, what happened to my finger? Did he do this to me? Those are the questions that start to come out. So it wasn't the first question, but it was something that she was the first to insinuate. And it's going to take me 6 hours to get this video. And then Artemis, I didn't like Galaway's approach this entire time either. And I think she genuinely believes Grace Jabari. That's the problem. She saw a woman, heard a woman, and just believed it. That's it. And she's the one in the position to pursue justice, to prosecute. So if you don't have the discernment to figure out why you're the one that's supposed to pursue justice, it's not good. And then Denise Oates. I only see 3 words, but I'm going to agree already. White female privilege at play, because if it was a black woman acting this way, the way she was when police was called, if black, she would have been arrested. Neighbors are feeling empathy for a drunk white woman. And I agree, especially when you have all that context. You see Jonathan Majors' facial expression in the video when he clearly tries to show, like, something about happening to me. This happened to me. And the officer says something back, which we can assume from, you know, the filings that Priya Chaudhry put together, is that moment where Swain says, if I slapped you right now, it wouldn't break a finger. And you see Jonathan Majors' face go. And that's the picture we see, like, used all the time, where he's standing in the penthouse with the, like, 4 officers standing behind him. It's from Swain's body camera. But yeah, you can see all of this coming into play when you watch that body cam footage. And then Erica says, seems to me, if they're adhering to a statute in New York, Bragg would have said so in a statement. He didn't charge her, so she would be free to testify against Jonathan Majors because that's who they wanted. So, yes, but remember, it's different when, you know, NYPD and prosecution act, they're 2 different arms, right? And the things that they do can associate with each other, but they're still 2 different arms. The NYPD is an arresting body, and then the prosecution is the prosecution body. They're supposed to have their own investigation. Again, the prosecution's investigation can rely on detective statements, things like that. But for 2 different police precincts to do an investigation, find probable cause, and then for the district attorney to do no investigation and predetermine that they're not going to file charges on the grounds of lacking prosecutorial merit, you can't determine that something lacks prosecutorial merit without actually doing a determination. You didn't investigate to determine. So that's a little trap I think they walked themselves into. And if we get to look at the appeal arguments, I'm sure it'll be in there, and I'd love to read it. Because they were out there. Ross Kramer gave that statement before the arrest was even made. And if no arrest is made, the DA is not investigating something. So how do you already know that something lacks prosecutorial merit? You admit indirectly you didn't do an investigation, which means you don't really have a genuine basis, a valid basis to say you're going to prosecute one person over the other. It's okay to decide to prosecute one person and not another when there's a cross complaint, because you kind of have to do something to make that work. Otherwise, they're both going to assert their Fifth Amendment right. And then you'll get no testimony from either parties, and you get to charge, you probably won't get to convict anyone. If the charges are extremely disproportionate, like, hey, they do get into a scuffle with each other, but, you know, the worst the one person did was just go, yeah, and mush him to the face and ran away, which is kind of what we see Jonathan Majors do. And the other person grabs their collars, pounding him in the face. That person gets knocked down. That person continues to punch him in the face. Yeah, they were both technically involved in this scuffle. And that one person did land a blow too. But the one we really want to get is the one that just had this vicious rage. And even when they could have walked away because the person was on the ground, they kept going. So we're going to cut a deal with this other person and decide not to prosecute them because of these reasons. This is what we've looked at. This is what we're deciding. And we're going to prosecute this person and ask this other person to testify. That's not at all what's happening with the Jonathan Majors and Grace Jabari cross complaints, because they don't investigate it at all. They just decide preemptively, without an investigation, we're just not going to prosecute her. And I think a lot of that comes down to not just biases, but the fact that they were already in communication and working with the Sanctuary for Families of New York, the nonprofit. Now, I'm sure they do great things for great people, but they still lobby. They still lobby for the party that Alvin Bragg belongs to. And we can read the tea leaves there. I don't know specifics. You can look up some of their lobbying records. But it's politics there, right? You have all these people, high-profile people that sit on the board for the Sanctuary for Families of New York. It's a nonprofit made up of a lot of high-profile people that continue to do political lobbying. There's an agenda there. And even though an ADA might not be an elected position, they're appointed by the people that are elected, the DAs that are elected. So I can't sit here and tell you I don't think politics play no factor here. But yeah, I don't think the reasoning here is just so, hey, you don't want to charge both parties because they're both going to plead the fifth. That's something you can do, but you have to have a reason for choosing one party over the other. And I'm sure Priya Chaudhry and Seth Zuckerman are going to raise that issue on appeal. And I would love to see it. And then Drea, Denise is replying to Drea. It was a, what did he do? Something like that, which I feel, yeah, it was like, the transcript is there. And you can search it. Just search the word confused. Search the word confused on, that was the day Jimmy was in court. So that must have been December 7th, day 7 of the trial. So if you go to that transcript and just read the word confused, it'll come right up. I can probably do that on the back end if you want to do it now. And then Ty, if he doesn't get sentenced today, does it go into tomorrow? Will it be delayed a few days? They probably have stuff on the calendar for other cases tomorrow. I'm sure it'll end up being delayed for another period of time. Just in a bubble. If the motions impact sentencing, the motions might need to be hashed out or argued further, which would extend that even further. And this is why I said, Kevin Porter Jr. has the finances and the lack of evidence on his side to fight a trial or fight his charges. But he took a plea deal because trial could go on for, you see how long this is going on for Jonathan Majors. That's millions for an NBA player to miss out on. Just to sit in limbo and still take the risk that you get slapped with a split verdict. And then let me see if I can find this confused right now. Okay, cool. So let me share this tab. We are looking at day 7 of Grace Jabari's testimony, and from searching confused, we get to, actually that wasn't the first one. All right, so they're saying you were between the bathroom and the closet. That's what I believed was to be when they found me. The police are calling your name. The first question the police say to you is, what's your name, correct? Hearsay, judge, that's overruled. This is from what I watched yesterday. Yeah, and you got to watch it again because you're inconsistent about it. Yes, that's the first question I heard them say on that video, yes. You didn't tell them your name is Grace, right? I didn't answer. And the next thing police ask you is if you could hear them, right? Officer Swain says, can you hear me, right? Yes. And the first thing you say after the police show up is, I'm confused right now, right? Yes. And this is at 11:20, 19 seconds. So a few seconds after the police come, right? I believe so. You see how she's so unsure, but she has the video right in front of them with Swain is the one saying it. This is the timestamp. I believe, yeah, I guess. And then Officer Swain asks you, you don't know why you're here, and you respond, I remember being sick, isn't that true? Yes, and then they go into the sleeping tablets. So going back to, Denise and Drea figuring out like what it was she exactly said when the police showed up. They ask her, hey, can you hear us? What's your name? I'm so confused right now. Can you hear us? But you heard Jonathan Majors trip over a suitcase apparently 2 floors below you, according to what you told Holly Blakey. And then following up on this testimony here about the body cam audio and what she says when the police first get there, Drea says, but to an officer who in their opinion found her unconscious. Yep, so they thought they were walking in because of that medical call, attempted unaliving. They thought they were walking into something where this girl was going to be unconscious, validly so. And then point the finger at him, even if that wasn't her initial intention. Juanita. So have any of you guys looked at Grace Jabari since she testified and seen any of what she's doing on Instagram, or that, especially that one statement that she made about, I'm losing my train of thought. Oh, that she made for her birthday around the end of December about the Southern Sanctuary for Families of New York nonprofit and thanking them for all the help they gave her during her time of need. Positioning herself as a DV victim that normally needs to get the help of charities like this to get out of a situation. She was out there like celebrating and like putting herself into that role, asserting herself into that role to paint that visual that, when you think someone being helped by a DV shelter, a DV nonprofit, you picture like actually battered person. And I think she wants people to see her that way. That's just my opinion, but you guys are here. If you've seen any of that, I want to know what you guys think. Oh, wait, here for the... All right, your name works. So here for the laugh says, I wouldn't hire Grace to water my plants. Guys, I just went out and bought I have a balcony and it's pretty small, but it gets good sunlight and I'm in Florida. So it's like, we're like USDA zone 9 or something for growing plants. And it's February here, which means it's already hot. I won't be in hoodies much longer on my streams, but I just bought a raised bed for my balcony and I've got a bunch of plants out there that I'm watering, but I haven't put them in the raised bed yet with new soil. They're still in the starter seed plants. So I'm like literally like, I gotta water my plants today. And then Here for Laughs comes along and says, I wouldn't hire Grace to water my plants. Just a shot fired. But yeah, definitely politics. Jonathan Majors is a big fish. Hold on, and Andre Ware is saying, yeah, she was laying there with her jaws off, just sitting there right next to her in a pile. And don't forget, guys, so if you watch me react to Chillmonger's clip of that footage where Swain is like pantomiming, you get one clip where you see like gym shorts or sweatpants rolled up with what looks like boxers. Like, when you take like sweats and boxers off or underwear off at the same time, you might unroll them. They're kind of like intertwined and tangled up into each other, like you're just stepping out of them and leaving them there. That's how they look sitting on this floor in this clip of the body cam next to her. And I was like, those kind of look like boxers. So unless Jonathan Majors just left that sitting there after he got done working out 2 days ago or whatever, and they've been sitting there ever since, which means she laid down and passed out laying on them if they were Jonathan Majors, which would be weird. They're probably hers. They're probably the pants and the boxers she was wearing. Maybe she wears boxers all the time, or maybe she was wearing Jonathan Majors boxers and sweatpants. Because then we see her wearing this green, she calls it a jumper. In America, we call it just a sweatshirt. It was like a crew neck sweatshirt, green color. Priya Chaudhry, in her April 18th letter, says that is a sweatshirt that's especially sentimental to Jonathan Majors. So we've got this pile of sweatpants and boxers laying on the ground, and I'm not saying girls don't wear boxers that they own, but you could be wearing your boyfriend. We know now that you're wearing a sentimental sweatshirt from the man you just resolved to leave and move on from because he's so horrible. You have sweatpants and boxers tangled up on the ground next to you, which maybe they're yours. I'm thinking maybe they're not. And you're wearing a crew neck sweatshirt that belongs to the person you hate, that just hurt you, that you can't stand, that you just tell your friend, I'm moving, and then you go and lay down. Like, does that seem like the behavior of someone that wants to leave their boyfriend, or now at this point, ex-boyfriend, by their terms? Hold on, and then Artemis is building on Here for Laugh saying, LMAO, yes, she can't keep a house or cook. She'd definitely kill a fern. Guys, I have an aloe plant that's been with me through so many moves. I never water it. It gets some rainwater when the rain is, because the rain gets really bad in Florida. I'm near the coast, so the wind can like almost blow the rain vertically through the screen sometimes. And the rain, in that case, can get through to where the aloe plant sits and like get it some rain once in a while. When I tell you that aloe plant has persevered, like that aloe plant is resilient. So I am assuming that ferns are kind of the same way if Grace Jabari couldn't kill it. Yeah, and then Denise is like, even though there is a sister right there in New York that's an attorney, we're going to call Holly Blakey. But apparently the sister wasn't answering. But even at 9:30 p.m. on March 25th, she's out of the hospital. Ben Toddy leaves. Ben Toddy's like, why are you still hanging out in this penthouse apartment? Like, I just packed for you. Like, get your stuff and go. And that's my creative licensing, acting out Ben's demeanor. But he did say these things, like, you should get out of the penthouse. Like, and we know that he was packing up his stuff for her, dance stuff for her. Not stuff for her to move, but stuff she needed for a work trip that was already planned. He helped pack her work stuff so she could get on this flight that was already booked before March 25th. Once she hangs out a little while longer, she's still texting Jonathan Majors like, I love you, please respond. She ends up going to her sister's once Ben Toddy leaves. She goes to her sister's probably because she can't handle being alone. And then from her sister's, presumably at 9:32 p.m., she texts another text to Jonathan Majors like, I just spoke to the prosecution. Please talk to me. Please answer me. Just going on and on and on. Again, not the behavior. I can't envision that being the behavior of someone that resolved to move and leave. And then let's see. Again, Artemis says, ferns are hardy, not as good as succulents, but very low maintenance. My aloe plants don't die either, Here for Laughs says. I use them as moisturizer for my face. I got sun poisoning last summer. I was barely even outside. I don't know what happened. I wasn't on like a prescription or, some things can give you sensitivity to sun. Oh my God. I thought I was going to die and I was like, my aloe plant. And I went over and it helped so much. Like, bless that aloe plant. I showed it no love and it was still there for me anyway. The aloe says I will survive. And that's true. So I don't really have much else going on here. I will pay attention around, 2 p.m. Eastern. It is, let me pull up that, who's reporting from Pix 11? Is James? Hold on, maybe it'll show up in my recent followers. Let me search Pix 11 James. I think his name was James. Nope, I'm not doing a very good search right now. Yeah, there we go. So I think he is still going to be the one paying attention at 2:15. So I'll set up my alerts for him. But if you guys want to give James Ford TV, he's a reporter with Pix 11 News, who was the one to say, hey, Priya Chaudhry showed up, filed a bunch of motions, and then everything, we're leaving court now, but we're going to reconvene at 2:15. They're going to appear virtually. But I think he's still going to be in the courtroom with the judge. So we could probably get some timely updates from him. If you want to see them in real time, I dropped the link to his X profile in the chat. So you guys can go over there and give him a follow. It'll be faster news than I get to. I'll do a video after I see news from him. So shout out to James Ford for covering that. And I think that's it, you guys. We'll get together. We'll talk about any news that comes out of this virtual hearing that's going to take place at 2:15 Eastern, hopefully, and doesn't get delayed again. If you guys see anything else interesting, just shoot me a message or drop a comment on this video and we can look at it together. I appreciate you guys coming into the chats. Like, you guys are detectives. You guys see so much detail. And I try to come on here and bring you detail, but to have you guys be so insightful is always so much fun. I've always loved being in chats on other people's channels, so it's really cool to be on the other side of it and get to like stare in at your questions and then be like, what are you talking about? Oh my God. So it's always really fun. I appreciate you guys always for showing up. And until we get together again, you guys take care. Bye-bye, guys.